here we are. We're back. We're live. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Miskatonic Alumni Association. I am one of your talking heads, literally, in the picture. I'm Bill, and with me always is my good friend, my partner in arms, Terry. How you doing, Terry?
Doing well, doing well. Another beautiful day down here in South Africa. How about over there in Japan?
I was not a bad day. Yeah, it's getting a little bit cooler now. Fall is approaching. So it's not scorching heat and 300% humidity every day. So I'm starting to enjoy the cooler air coming in.
So, our last episode we were talking about the Call of Cthulhu RPG, but I
Yes.
know for this one we're back to our favorite topic of current affairs, should I
Yeah.
say? The next episode of Lovecraft Country, right?
Yep. Our current favorite topic, yeah, is Lovecraft Country. It's the big thing on TV. It's the thing driving a lot of people to Lovecraft. And Lovecraft is something we love. So, yeah, we're going to talk about it and hopefully talk with more of you about it too. I mean, there's a lot to discuss about this series and a lot to dig into, even if it's not strictly Lovecraftian as we discussed in previous episodes.
So this is episode 4 of Lovecraft Country, A History of Violence.
Yes.
I suppose the title refers a lot to it's Thomas Braithwaite, right? The patriarch of the Braithwaite family,
Mm.
who was a slave trader and numerous other things that would be this history of violence. So anyway, like that character plays like a huge role, like that sets them off on what I think is the talking point for this episode, like an Indiana Jones style pulpy adventure that George Lucas himself would be proud of.
Yeah,
So what were
definitely.
your thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think there's really only one talking point. Usually we have like three or four points when we watch these videos, like, oh, it has this aspect or this, but I think honestly, pulpy adventure is the talking point. This, and I think it's good we did this episode after we did the video about the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, because this was straight up a pulp Cthulhu role-playing game adventure. I mean it, and from just the concept of like secret passages and tunnels and hidden treasure, and just how over the top the traps and the ordeal is that the characters have to go through. Uh, it's what you would expect to find in a pulpy adventure in a role playing game, or indeed in a pulp story. So, yeah, when I was watching it, like regardless of my feelings on it, which we're going to get into, I just thought, like, wow, this is watching a live action rendition of people playing the role playing game.
It's actually interesting now that I look back. Like out of the 4 episodes so far, we've only really had monsters as such in the first two. Like depends whether you think ghosts qualify as monsters, but I think I'm coming more from like a Lovecraft style monster point of view. So we only really saw those like as I referred to Shoggoths in episode 1 and 2. We saw the ghost in episode 3, and this one was totally devoid of any sort of ghosts slash monsters slash supernatural stuff, if I remember right.
Well, not
Um,
exactly. At the very end.
mhm.
At the very end, we get our glimpse of the supernatural in this.
True, true. That for some reason that like I'm not going to get into it yet, but like for some reason that gave me a really strong Pirates of the Caribbean feeling. I don't know why. I felt like they were in a pirate ship
Yeah.
at the end, but I'm suppose we'll talk more about that at that point. Like
Yeah.
I know there was a few callbacks already. You and me were already discussing that model of the solar system in the previous episode, the orrery
Yeah.
that who was it? Hippolyta saw when
Yeah.
she was going through the house that Letty had bought, and we weren't sure like why were they focusing on it. So that was called back. Like um, What did they sort of? I know you caught the hint as to why it's important, but like, what was the significance of it? Like, why focus on it?
Well, I remember they mentioned at one point because Christina Braithwaite, she was looking for it, and they mention, and I'm just trying to find like where I think it might have been the scene where she's talking with the corrupt cop, who's clearly in on this. What is it? Sons of Adam? Is that the group? He seems to
I
be
think so, yeah.
connected to it somehow, and I believe it's when they were talking, but they mentioned that it's a time machine, and I know I heard the word time machine. I thought, well, that's odd. But you caught something else about the orrery that I didn't notice at all. Something really unique about this solar system. What was that?
Apparently, it's got well, Orrery is obviously the model of the solar system, right? So you think it would be a model of our solar system, and the only difference here was that it's got two suns. So I don't know how that's going to come into play later. If it's like going to transport us to another the plains of Leng or whatever it
Yeah.
is. But that should be interesting to see how that plays
Yeah.
out. I know, like another call, well, not a callback, but another sort of thing that you'd brought up, like right in episode one that we were discussing, was like the sort of incongruency of the music choices sometimes, where they're using like really contemporary music for the show that's set in the 50s.
Yeah.
And this was like the first episode for me where they really just stuck out. Every time they used a song and it was a contemporary song, I was just sort of like jerked right out of like the story setting, which for me
Yeah.
was really a bit of a down point. Not a huge thing, but still something I think with noticing, right?
Yeah, it's been doing that to me since the first episode. And I know some of the people I talk to online about too, they say the same thing. Like even if you want to use the contemporary songs, why not do a cover version of it in the 1950s style? Or at least an older style that would fit in this show, just to keep the theme of it going, just to keep the period piece, because I don't really see the point in having a period show, but then having the music just be completely modern, anachronistic, and out of place. And of course, the characters themselves, they aren't hearing the music. It's for our benefit as a viewer or as a listener in this case. But it's just it doesn't fit in with the whole theme and the design and everything else that the show is presented as. They're going very, very realistic with the depiction of life at the time, including all the horrible aspects of racism, wrapped in with a horror story, but then for no reason at all, there's this modern music. So yeah, it's really weird, and every time it comes up, I it just makes me pause and think, why? Why does this have to be there?
I know, like another little thing we do every week when we talk about the shows, there's like a little book watch because they love
Yeah,
throwing in references to books. So I only really spotted two. First one was like when they were in Uncle George's workshop and sort of just doing a little camera move through the bookshelf was Pilgrims Through Space and Time, which is apparently if I can check, says a history and analysis of scientific fiction, which I suppose fits in really well,
mm,
seeing a lot of the books and references are made to classic works of science fiction. And the only other one was a small boy in the library that
yeah,
Tick was doing some research in when Letty grabbed hold of him, was a Journey to the Center of the Earth, which I think you mentioned actually gets a callback in the episode as
yeah.
well
Tick
later
says
on,
it.
right?
Tick says it exactly when they get down into the chasm. I don't know exactly what this kind of vault is that they go down to, but the episode's about the trio, the three of them going on this big Indiana Jones adventure. And when I mean we'll get to the Indiana Jones-esque part of how they find this vault, but when Tick drops down, he's the first to go down. As he's looking around this underground chamber, he says, "Oh, this is straight out of Journey to the Center of the Earth," which, like you say, is a callback, but it also made me think again of something I mentioned maybe in when we discussed episode 1 or episode 2. Like, could this all be just in Tick's head? Could maybe all of this be a dream? There are no monsters, there is no magic. None of this is really happening. This is all just Tick experiencing it. So he sees this little boy in the library reading this book, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and then all of a sudden he's on his own adventure to the center of the Earth. And there's just so much in all the episodes where things Tick experiences in the real world seem to manifest themselves as these fantastic elements that he encounters. So, I mean, I'm still holding on to a very, very thin thread that this may all end up just being Tick's way of, I don't know if you want to say, accepting the reality, the horrible reality that he's in, and just putting an overlay of the fantastic on top of it to get through, or for whatever reason, or if this is just very, very not so subtle ways of bringing in literature into the adventures.
Yeah, so I suppose maybe it's a good chance for us to actually get into like a brief recap of the episode. Like, I know they're now on the sort of hunt for these missing pages from the Book of Names, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure. Like, if they actually said, like, I think it was an episode or two ago, they said, like, what happens once they can actually get these pages, like Titus's pages
Uh,
from the Book of Names? Like, what does that give them? What sort of power or ability?
I don't recall exactly if they said it, but I know that is supposed to unlock the language of Adam, I think, so that they'll be able to use the real magic, not just like the stunted magic that they have. It was something along those lines, but I honestly don't remember if they said what it's supposed to do specifically.
Because I know then, let's see, it's like quite D, Hippolyta, Tick, Letty, Montrose, and one of the guys from the bar also seemed to jump in the car and take a trip through to Boston.
Yeah.
With a guy from the bar just like grabbing a lift part way to get a filly,
Hmm.
because I know they've got an idea that these pages or something is going to be hidden at this museum in Boston
Yeah.
that I think Titus Braithwaite actually used. Or yeah, so they then I think that was the first sort of weird part for me was when they had an idea like, okay, where's this hidden? They break in there at night,
Mm.
um, and they're searching for it, and then they don't. How can I say? Montrose just seems to say like, oh look, it's the moonlight, and it happens to be the first sort of really Indiana Jones style thing where the moonlight hits the statue at the right point, gets reflected onto a map, which then reflects it back to another part of the statue, which I felt that was a bit like sort of pulpy, which fits in, but at the same point, I'm just you sign like, ah, yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing clever about it. Like, how does Montrose even know? Unless there's something about Montrose we don't know.
I mean, he was
And
reading all
this
the
then
books.
starts,
He was reading all the things. He had their handbook that he got from George, and then he burned it earlier in the episode. So he's reading all these secrets about it. But also, when Tick was researching, he found out his father already checked out these books before him. So he found his name inside the library book, all the library books for the same thing. So Montrose has obviously been doing his research, but even still, like that's so over the top. Like, I accepted it because now I realize this is a very pulpy adventure show. It's not trying to be a realistic drama, and especially it's not trying to be a Lovecraftian drama. But in that regards, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, it's a big poppy thing, but realistically, it's like the moon is not in the same position every day, and it's not even in the same position minute to minute. So if it had to be at that certain point to send that beam in, to trigger this, trigger that, do that, and open up the thing, they would have to be there at the precise time, which they clearly were. So it's one of those things you have to be like, oh, okay, it's a Indie Jones adventure.
I know when they drop down, then they're like sort of presented with these three tunnels, and they're
Mm.
not really sure which of them to
Yeah,
take. Um, I really thought like at some point they were gonna actually call back to that as like, oh shit, we've made a mistake. We've got to like sort of come back with something. But they seem to choose the right tunnel, and that was the end of that whole thing. Like I have no idea where these other two tunnels went to.
yeah,
Um, which I found that was a lot of times there's these like sort of little threads I feel that are just left dangling, and you're thinking like, oh, either like they can just cut it out like and just say, okay, here's one tunnel,
hmm,
or they've got to sort of give us the viewer a chance to sort of solve this little puzzle along with the characters. But a lot of the time, I just felt like as soon as they were presented with some sort of obstacle or puzzle in this adventure, they just immediately knew how to solve it. Like
yeah,
I know the one I mentioned to you before the show was when they had to cross that long chasm on this bridge that then started disappearing behind them, and they come to like this blocked door, and then they're frantically hitting it. And Montrose shouts like, "Okay, the code is," da, 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 and they put it in. They get through the door.
yeah.
Like I know I said to you that I actually had an idea it would be a callback to like the passage from this book that Montrose was reading right at the start. But like at no point do we see the symbols on the door, so we can't really make that connection for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nothing for that, but I mean you just really skipped over the chasm thing. Like I could not get over the chasm. Like I mean we talk about this being an Indiana Jones type adventure, and it's I mean that scene was like right out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You're at this bottomless chasm. There's just nothing in front of you, and there's this tiny little thing to cross. And I mean, they don't do it the exact same way as in the movie, but I mean, when you're already starting with an Indiana Jones style adventure, and then you copy a scene so closely, and then it even has the swinging blades going across it, like one of the other challenges in the Indiana Jones movie, and they have to leap so they don't get caught by the blades. So I mean, there's just a lot of these conveniences, and then that board, whatever that little plank that they're crossing, it starts to dissolve magically, and they all have to jump and start running very wildly before they get to that door. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that like, oh well, it's plot armor. You know, they're going to survive no matter what. They're going to go through it where it's just a wild adventure. So it was a wild scene, but not logical at all from start to finish, including once they got through the door. But again, that might come up in a future episode because as we see later with Montrose, there's more going on with him than we're aware of at this point. So, I mean, there might be some more revelations coming up of why he knew that code immediately.
Yeah, and I know once they come through that door eventually, and they come across this elevator,
Hmm.
and while they're going there, they see this like dead floating body in the water that turns out to be like one of the sort of racist neighbors that had broken into Lady's house
Yeah,
in the previous episode and been killed. And I know you referred to it as well, like saying like if they're in Boston underneath this museum, how are they now underneath like her apartment or house
yeah.
in Chicago? So I don't know if we're supposed to assume that like time and space are like sort of broken,
Yeah.
yeah, or I don't know whether that's a plot hole or whether that we should just accept that things are
Yeah.
as they are. Yet, so I'm not sure how to read that.
I honestly don't know myself. I was confused when that happened because that looks like the tunnel that was under her house in the last episode when the elevator finally went down to the basement. And you think, oh, this is where all the bodies disappear to in this secret passage under the house. But now they're all the way in Boston, or at least somewhere in Massachusetts. I know they did not walk all the way back to Chicago underground in the course of one night. So clearly they're not in the same location, yet that's where the corpse is. And yet that's where the tunnel is, and we've seen it right underneath their house. So I was confused for a bit. Like was it their house in Chicago? Are they still in Massachusetts? Why'd they move there? But yeah, it might be like you said. It's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey type nonsense going on, and it's a kind of magic, possibly.
And I know then they come to that little final obstacle with like this dismembered arm stuck in this hole in the door.
Yeah,
And I think at that point I wasn't really surprised when, Tick puts his arm in and it's his blood,
yeah,
again, like his blood that is so special that opens this door and, well, pops a ladder down that they then climb up to the next part. But I think sometimes like it just feels like they're almost like throwing these things in, not with a lot of thought or effort. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So this is the passage. They hit the code. They go through. Oh, they're by this elevator. Oh, yes, this other door, and it's his blood. Like I feel like there's not a lot of sort of thought put into these puzzles, both
no,
for us as a viewer and the actual characters in the show.
no, it's very low effort, that's for sure. But I want to say now, especially with that scene here, I I think that this was the point where it turned in my mind from an Indiana Jones ripoff to a Goonies ripoff, because you have like the secret doors you're trying to find the latch to open up, and then boom, a ladder drops down, just like in One-Eyed Willie's ship. And then they climb up the secret ladder to where the real hidden chamber is. And I swear to God, that place, it looked like One-Eyed Willie's cabin in the Goonies. And that's the whole thing I was thinking of the whole time. It's like they're in One-Eyed Willie's cabin. And you just have all the dead people in there, and they're going around, and you find the head of this group of deceased people, whoever they are. And just the whole, you take something from them and it triggers the trap or whatever. And it was 100% Goonies. 100% Goonies right there. It was just so weird. This episode, I don't know how to describe it, but please give me your take on the wild supernatural ending that we got there.
I think I can sort of see the Goonies reference now that you actually mention it. I know I said like Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it was probably this like ship, right?
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. Like this was part of the show where I sort of got a bit lost. I don't know whether it was just like for me the sound mix and I maybe missed some stuff in that, but like I got the idea there was this person who I found out afterwards is from supposed to be Arawak tribe of like South America and the Caribbean, and I think it's a hermaphrodite. So he or she says then they've had like I didn't really catch their history with Titus and why like they're part of this whole thing and why she's got the last pages and that this was a part of the show
yeah.
that I just sat there going like, okay, I'm just gonna let this wash over me like a really bad action movie. Like I'm not gonna put any thought into it. Like, Bill, did you catch it all? Like, why is she the one holding these two pages now? Like,
I'm not sure. I mean, clearly, whatever happened there in One-Eyed Willie's cabin is tied into Titus Braithwaite and who was the guy? Winthrop, was that it?
mm,
Uh, who I think was the one who took the pages. So clearly, there's some connection there, and why Tick is able to understand her and she can understand him. There has to be some connection with their blood, since blood's the main thing and the history. But who they are and why they have these pages, I have no idea. And it just became even more frustrating because uh, this person is resurrected right there as soon as Titus grabs the item. And like just this huge transformation. You think it might be a zombie attack, but no, they are becoming reborn into flesh and blood. And you think, okay, we got this new character now, this really wild, over the top new character. And we don't get to learn too much about them. And then what happens?
Well, it's like they escape, right? So
Yeah.
they're there, and then Montrose walks in the room, apologizes to her, slits her throat, fade to
Yeah.
black credits. And
And then,
it's the second time we've had like a death as the sort of like cliffhanger
yeah.
ending of an episode. And I was sort of like, just like, okay, why introduce this character only
Yeah.
for him slash her to be killed off in the
Why
episode?
introduce this
Like,
character in such a big, animated, and expensive VFX way if they're not going to serve any purpose? I mean, they could come back. I mean, the death in this show, it doesn't necessarily mean the end, but it doesn't look like Montrose would kill this person if it wasn't going to be permanent. Like otherwise,
yeah,
that would
because
be pointless.
if I recall correctly, like the reason like she was with them was because she had to translate the pages for them, right?
Yeah,
Because Tixtor says like he's going to teach her English so she can
yeah,
translate it into their language rather than him translate it from theirs,
yeah,
if I remember how he phrased
something
it.
like that. Yeah,
So I suppose there's some reason now Montrose is trying to keep this secret or doesn't want to get it out. So I'm sure there's going to be in the forthcoming episode, we're going to see like, oh, Montrose has actually got like some sort of more deeper history with this
yeah.
secret or whatever. But yeah, I think that was the episode in a little nutshell, right?
Basically, yeah.
I,
There's not a lot to unpack from this episode. It's just a wild roller coaster ride that doesn't always make sense, but it does have some entertaining beats. I just think it overall to me it felt like a pointless episode. And I enjoyed a lot of it, but I still thought it was pointless. It was pointless for that bar guy to go with them because what was the connection to Philadelphia? It was pointless for them to find this, was it Arawak, did you say? Arawak
mm,
tribe person, reanimate them from the dead, and then kill them instantly right after before they help at all. I mean, just all, and like you said, all the puzzles, all the traps and everything, they solve in the least creative way possible. And like, oh, I know the answer, here it is. Oh, I know the answer, here it is. So
I,
yeah, it
I,
just seemed
I,
pointless.
I felt like this was almost a speed run episode where like at the same point they seem to get through all these puzzles really quick. Like I never really felt like, oh no, a character might actually die here.
Yeah,
They're never really in any danger. But at the same point, like I found like they could have just condensed this whole thing down into half the time it took to do this and still not lose any of the plot. Like I know like there was a lot of stuff they used to pad it out, but one thing we've both skipped over that was probably the linchpin of this whole episode was the hide and seek sequence in this little street where Christina
yeah,
Braithwaite is like
yeah,
playing hide and seek with these little kids. Like, Bull,
yeah.
can you unpack the extraordinary depth they put in that scene?
Well, we're already running out of time here, so I'll just unpack it the same way that I unpacked it to you first time. I don't get what these pointless random character building scenes are for Christina. Like in episode 2, she goes gives birth to a slug calf or something for no reason. And like, have you ever done this before? No. Like, well then why were you there? Okay, why did you feel the need to do that? Now in this episode, she's playing tag or hide and go seek with some random kids on the street in some suburban neighborhood for no reason, like running around like a little kid doing that just so she could be pulled in by the racist and cult member police. Like, there's no point to these scenes. It's just like, let's show this aspect of her. Like, why does it have to be an aspect? But yeah, and there was also a bit with her blonde friend Ken, Ken the Barbie doll, and Ruby, is it? And I don't know there. I just want to bring this up. I don't really know what the point of that scene was, but I'm wondering if it's trying to get into the house to break that voodoo spell that's keeping Christina out. If he is able to get himself in, maybe he's able to break it, sort of like how if a vampire is invited in, they can now come in even if there were protections up against it. So I don't know, that too early to say anything, but yeah, like I said, we're already at the end of this episode, so no use speculating on stuff that made zero sense, right?
Yeah, I think like probably the last thing I'll say about it was just for me, it was pretty much like a really pointless fluff episode.
Yeah,
Just like if you skip this, I don't think you're going to lose much
not plot
at all.
wise,
So
no.
let's hope next week's better then.
Yeah, I will say this. I will just say one point. Even though, like you say, I agree with you. I never felt like the characters were really in any danger at all. It just felt like a lot of wheel spinning. I will say, even with that in my mind, the performances of the actors were so convincing that you believe they were in danger. You could see in the face they gave a great performance. All three of them, all three of the leads. That like, wow, this is a really dangerous situation. But in the back of your head, you know, like, but they're safe. So if you were just going watching how they're acting, you know their characters feel the danger. But you as a viewer, I don't think you feel that as well. But I mean, bravo to them for their performance, especially Montrose. He really has a great way of expressing emotion. That you can feel the pain inside of him. So I mean, that's I like that about the episode, and that's my final point right there.
Perfect. So I think this will be the second sort of video slash podcast we're putting up this week. So we'll probably be back next week again.
Yeah,
There's obviously weekly episodes of Lovecraft Country with the odd Cthulhu slash Lovecraft influenced discussion as well.
yeah.
Um, other than that, Bo, anything else we should say before we sign off?
No, I mean, you might be getting a couple game actual plays in of some Cthulhu stuff coming up in the near future. Aside from that, yeah, I mean, we have the podcast versions of this, and we have social media. So, again, our goal is to chat with people, is to have conversations. That's why we're doing this. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about. So please keep sending messages, keep chatting with us, and yeah, come back next week and let's see if it gets better.
Definitely looking forward to it. So big thanks again to all our usual sponsors, if I can put it that way. Like we've got the Howard Phillips Lovecraft Historical Society
Yep.
again for some of like
Always
the.
supporting us. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So definitely worth checking them out, and everything else like is obviously in our little show notes, both on YouTube and on the podcast. So people can just click any of the links there and leave us a voice message or comment or whatever, and like you say, get a discussion started and
Please do.
spread the joy that Lovecraft brings with his older gods and so on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's it then for this week. So thanks a lot.
Perfect. Be
Yeah.
seeing you.
Yeah, we'll be seeing you next time. Take it easy and stay safe.